Hello and welcome everybody to the exclusive Substack Worldwide Honeymoon Travel Podcast. And today we have a very special guest. We have Annie from Join Us in France, who is a fellow podcaster as well. I was just on her podcast, I think a month ago or a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it's not
very
been
briefly.
released yet, but yes, you will be on the podcast.
Yes, where we talked about romantic things to do in Paris. But now we're going to be talking about the southwest of France, where Annie currently lives. And I believe you're from there as well, correct?
Correct. I'm born and raised.
Yes.
I lived in the U.S. I lived in England for a couple of years and in the U.S. for 16. But I'm from the South. I was born in Toulouse. So, yeah.
Perfect. Well, welcome, Annie, to the podcast. And we're so excited to have you here today, especially because you've been podcasting for a while as well. And you are an expert in France travel, and particularly the southwest of France, where you live. But before we get started, I just wanted to learn a little bit more about Join Us in France. How did you get started with that? And just tell us a little bit more about that.
So briefly, the podcast is about to turn 11 years old. Published my first episode in February 2014. And the reason why I did this is because having lived away from home so long, when I moved back, I realized I didn't really know my own country very well. I had, of course, I speak the language, and my parents and siblings are here, my cousins are here, but I really didn't understand my own country all that well. And I decided, okay, I got to find a way to explore that. It also coincided with the time when my father passed away, and I had been taking care of him for his last few years. He needed quite a bit of help, and since I was in a position where I could do it, I did it. But then when he passed, it was like a big gap in my life, and I decided I need to fill this gap with this desire I had for a long time to start a podcast. Nowadays, everybody has a podcast, but in 2014, it was not the case. And so it was a pretty steep learning curve for me, because I was a technical translator before. Worked for companies in the US doing technical translation, and I had never done any audio or website or anything like that. So, but I learned, and here we are 14 years later.
Wow, congrats on 11 years.
Thank you.
That's incredible. I think we're hitting 6 years next month in our podcast, because we started.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So it's exciting, and I get the sentiment about not knowing your own country well enough. I feel like even in the U.S. here, there are times where I'm like, well, I could go somewhere here, or I could go somewhere, far away, and
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But so now you're back in the southwest of France, and you said Toulouse.
Yes, I live near Toulouse, and I have been back for 20 years. I think in May it'll be 20 years that we've been back, and my husband is from the U.S., but he was game, and
Yeah.
we're here. And our daughter was 7 when we moved, which means that she had done first grade in the U.S., so she could speak English, obviously, and even read it pretty well. And then we put her in French school, and now she's completely fluent in both. You know, she can switch. I mean, you can hear my accent a little bit sometimes, but with her, you don't hear any accent in either language, which is kind of neat, I think.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's very incredible. So you are, again, like we said, an expert here. I believe you do lead tours via the Voice Map app of different places. I want to say that, is that more Paris focused or Toulouse?
Yes, that's very much Paris focused.
Okay.
Because I realized very quickly that most people go to Paris.
Yes.
And so I at first I led a lot of in-person tours in Paris, but it was really hard to go back and back and back all the time. And so I decided, okay, I'm just going to make Voice Map tours, because the Voice Map app lets me speak to people, take them places. It's a GPS self-guided tour. And also, when I do it with Voice Map, I don't forget half of the stuff, which I do when I'm in person.
Yes. I get that.
So,
yeah. So I'm very excited to have you here on the podcast today to talk more about France, because, as you know, I have a France travel blog as well, and we talk about it a lot on my husband and I's podcast as well. So very excited to have you here. I'm actually going to the southwest of France later this year. So I'm also kind of like selfishly excited that we're to have you to learn a little bit more. But what destinations are we going to be covering in the southwest of France today?
So, okay, there are major areas of interest around Toulouse. So when you say southwest, in my mind, I'm going to exclude the Aquitaine area, which is Bordeaux and the Basque Country, and also the Atlantic coast, even though it is fabulous and you should go. But I'm going to concentrate on things you can do as day trips from Toulouse. And if you don't want to do day trips, you could just move around. But I think the areas of great interest are, so the Dordogne is one that's just fabulous. And that's actually, some of it is in Aquitaine, but it used to be in Occitanie. So, then the other area that's really of interest is Albi area, which is great. Carcassonne, obviously, is world famous. Then you have areas like Moissac, Montauban, that are not as touristy, but also very nice. Saint-Cirque-la-Popie and Pêche-Merle. So that, actually, I do guided tours to those places because I get a lot of people who want to go, but they don't want to drive themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I do tours in my EV. I have a wonderful EV, and I love going up there with people. And Pêche-Merle is it's a painted cave where you visit the actual painted cave. It's not a reproduction like it is in Sarlat. It's the actual cave. And Saint-Cirque-la-Popie is a beautiful medieval village, hilltop village. It's very nice. Another place that I like to take people to is Foix. That's south of Toulouse. And there's another painted cave where you visit the actual cave that's called Nio. And for both of those painted caves, you have to make reservations. You can't just waltz in, okay? But you can get in there. And the other place that I'm going to concentrate on is Rocamadour and the Gouffre de Padirac. And of course, there are many, many more, okay? This Friday, I'm going to go to a place called Saint-Lizier that I haven't visited in a long time. So I'm always discovering places of interest myself. So don't think by any means that this is like a finite.
This is the encyclopedic guide too.
Yes.
Is it the Occitanie region is what you were?
Yes, it's Occitanie is what it
Occitanie.
is. And you could do this as day trips, but like Rocamadour is a good 2.5 hours from Toulouse if you drive. So perhaps it would be more judicious to, one way is 2.5 hours. So it might be better to just get a hotel and stay the night in some of these places. And of course, the city of Toulouse is not bad. As well,
Yeah.
So yeah, there's plenty to see and do in Toulouse. And the other thing that I do is that even though I don't have voice maps for Toulouse, I do organize a what I call a boot camp every year. And the boot camp is 10 days in Toulouse. So we spend 2 weekends and the whole week in between. Well, 9 days, 2 weekends and the whole week in between. And on week mornings, our boot campers go to French school. So they go to a language school all morning, and then we take them on excursions the afternoon and also on longer excursions on the weekends. And that's, the boot camp. And we're doing it in May this year. We usually do it in May.
Nice. Yeah, that's good to know. Okay, well, do you want to dive in? I mean, all those things sound very excited. Let's talk about how to spend that full 7 days doing that.
So for me, I would spend 2 nights in Toulouse because it's a very nice, very well. As a matter of fact, what's the name of that publication? They listed Toulouse as the place you should go in 2025. It's Lonely Planet, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Toulouse was their number 1 place to discover in 2025. And they are right, because it's not a place where it's not been spoiled by tourism yet. It's very walkable. It's a very walkable downtown. We have a lot of wonderful cafes, restaurants, obviously. We have a few museums that you can visit, but I wouldn't say, that you'll spend most of your time in museums like some people do in Paris, for example. And we also have a lot of historical aeronautics. This is where Airbus are put together and painted and delivered. And, Airbus is a big company. And so we have a lot of aeronautics kind of contractors, work like that. You can visit the Aeroscopia Museum in Toulouse. Well, it's not in Toulouse, it's near the airport, where you can see an old Concorde, you can see an A380, you can see a lot of airplanes that are quite remarkable. And as a matter of fact, one of my earliest memories as a child was... It was a big deal when the Concorde first flew, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing it on TV and running to... I lived in downtown Toulouse at the time with my parents. They had an apartment. And running to the balcony and seeing the plane in the sky and seeing the same plane on TV. And I was like, oh, my mind is blown. Because it's a very... specific shape of an airplane. It's not like you could take, the Concorde for any other plane. And also we had the sonic boom every day around 11:30 for a long time. It would do Paris to Toulouse, and it landed. I don't know if it was landing or taking off, as a matter of fact, but it was 11:30, and that meant that lunch break was close.
Oh gosh.
So that's what you got for growing up in Toulouse when the Concorde was flying all the time.
That's really cool.
So Toulouse is just a place where you can spend a couple of nights. There's a very nice hotel, as a matter of fact, where l'Hôtel des Grands Balcons is on the Central Plaza. And the story with that hotel is that Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, he worked for Aéropostale, which was a company that flew mail to South America every day, and it was a business. And the owner of the company, his wife was pregnant, and one day she was walking around Toulouse doing some shopping and almost fainted right in front of this hotel. And the people in the hotel took such great care of her that they decided that he decided that all his pilots would forever after stay in this hotel to thank them for being so kind to his wife. And so Saint-Exupéry stayed in this hotel every time he came to Toulouse, and a lot of pilots and famous people from, if you like aeronautics, you've heard about all these people, and you can stay at this hotel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Let's see, what else do we have? We have a beautiful basilica. We have a beautiful city center, and of course, the specialty, the food specialty here is cassoulet, which is a bean kind of product. So people argue whether it was started in Toulouse, or if it was started in Carcassonne, or if it was started in Castelnaudary, which is in between the two towns. But it doesn't matter where it was started. It's very good. It's a great winter dish that we indulge in occasionally. I like to eat. So I ate it sometimes. And it's got sausage and duck and beans and lots of onions and garlic. What's not to love?
Yeah.
So when you're here, you can try that. We also have a lot of very good wines that are produced around here, and you can do some vineyard visits. That's also one thing I do with my electric cars. I take people around to vineyards, and the areas that are the one that's famous is Cahors, which is so on the way to Pêche-Merle, one of the painted caves that I mentioned. You can stop in Cahors and buy some of their wine. This is a kind of full-bodied red wine that's sold all over the world. But we also have other smaller kind of productions of wine. Gaillac is one of them that people really like. And Fronton is another, but I don't like it as much. So, so I tend to not take people there. Although when I take people, I don't drink at all because I'm driving.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it doesn't really matter to me.
Well, okay, so you mentioned a couple days in Toulouse, just kind of hanging out and exploring. I believe Toulouse, is that the Pink City? Is that
That's
what they call
right.
it?
Yes, that's the nickname because the brick that we use here has this. So, is it red? Is it pink? Is it in between? That's up to each person to decide. I say it's a bit kind of orangey. But brick was a very common building material here. And as a matter of fact, my sister, until recently, worked for one of the last producers of handmade bricks. And they had to stop because, well, the couple was retiring and nobody bought them out because these are really hard to sell because they are quite expensive for, I mean, you can buy bricks pretty cheap. And they make good imitations anymore. But anyway, brick from Toulouse was always a big deal. And if you pay attention, in Paris, the very the most expensive buildings were built of both brick and stone, because in Paris they have a lot of white stone that they just dug up from under the city. But if you go to the Place des Vosges or Place Dauphine, places like that, you see brick as well as stone, and that was the summum of good taste. And because they had to import brick from the southwest to make these beautiful buildings, which was very costly at the time.
Okay, that's. I didn't know that. I love Place des Vosges, and I know it's a brick. It's all surrounded by brick, so that's cool.
Right. So they outlined a lot of stuff in brick there. So if you were going to take a day trip from Toulouse, you could go to Rocamadour as well. Beautiful, beautiful hilltop village. This is due north of Toulouse. It's about 2.5 hours drive. But there's a freeway taking you there, so it's quite easy. Rocamadour does not have a train station. It's a hilltop village. It's stunningly beautiful. It's worth spending the night because you can see, the golden hour. You can see the late, the sunset and sunrise is absolutely stunning. And a tip for Rocamadour is just like all hilltop villages, it's very steep and has a lot of stairs, but you can park at the top. When I go with customers, that's what I do, and that's what I recommend people do. You park at the top, and then you buy an elevator pass, because they have elevators. You have to pay for it. It's 15 euros or something. And then you can go up and down as many times as you'd like, which is handy dandy. You don't have to be sweaty, because you will get, there are people who can do this without breaking a sweat, but not too many people.
Yeah.
So Rocamadour is a beautiful place. And then nearby, not too far, you have the Gouffre de Padirac, which is a chasm in the earth. It's a big hole in the ground. And you go down there. It's partially stairs, partially elevators. And you get to the bottom, and there's a river at the bottom, and you can go on a boat ride. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I have been going to Gouffre de Padirac since I was a child, and they do a photo of you. And so we have photos of our family, every couple of years exiting the Gouffre de Padirac. So that's a beautiful destination right there. There's also a Forêt des Singes. So that's like a monkey's forest. They are fun to look at. If you go with children, you probably should do that.
Yeah.
So that would be one full day. Well, actually, I recommend you spend the night.
Okay.
You'd be better off. In the same kind of general direction is Saint-Cirque-la-Popie and Pêche-Merle. So that's the Painted Cave. And I would do the Pêche-Merle first thing in the morning. They have a morning English tour most days at 10:15. And so you spend the morning there, and then you can drive to Saint-Cirque-la-Popie, have lunch there, spend the afternoon. And if you're if you would like to take a nice hike, you can actually walk, because there's a towpath on the river. Because long ago, boats didn't have motors, as you know, it was unusual to have a motor, and so people would pull the boat, or animals would pull the boat with big old ropes. And so all along the rivers and canals, you had to have a towpath, and you can still walk this towpath. They've improved it. They've put some beautiful carvings on the side. It's a beautiful thing to do. The first, and that starts in Bouziès, is the name of that town where it starts. The first part near Bouziès is very easy to walk. It's very flat, whatever. But then as you get to the medieval village, it gets steeper and a little bit more challenging, but doable for most people.
Okay.
So that would be another day. Kind of in the same direction and not as touristy at all is Montauban and Moissac. Those are the Place Nationale in Montauban is beautiful. It was restored not long ago. There's also an Ingres and Bourdelle museum who were from Montauban. You can see the Vieux Pont and things like that. It's a beautiful place to have. And if you go on Saturday morning, they have a lovely, lovely Saturday morning market. I have a first cousin who lives in Montauban, so at least once a year we go spend a Saturday morning with her, and we have lunch. And she's a teacher, so she knows the history really well. Because so in France, schools take kids to museums. Mm-hmm. And so she's always taking kids to museums and learning about all the history. Anyway, she's fascinating. So that would be Montauban. Moissac has a beautiful UNESCO World Heritage Site. The cloister is listed. It has beautiful Romanesque carvings. You can walk by the river. It's, Moissac is a beautiful place. Now, in a different direction, we're going east from Toulouse, Carcassonne. Okay, that one everybody knows.
Yeah.
Carcassonne is a beautiful walled city, medieval city. It's a what would you call it? Citadel, I guess, is
Yep.
the name for that.
Yeah.
And the old citadel has been very well preserved. You can visit the citadel in about 2 hours. Have you been?
No, I haven't. No,
Okay.
I've never been to like the southwestern part of France,
Okay,
so that's
okay.
why I'm going later this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the citadel you can visit in a couple of hours. I would say you don't need to spend the night. I mean, if you want to, it's fine. There's a very nice hotel called Hôtel de la Cité. It's very fancy, very nice. There's also youth hostels, so you have the whole range. But you can see it in 2 or 3 hours. You can walk on the ramparts. On the 14th of July, there's a fabulous fireworks in Carcassonne. But what are the odds that you're going to go? And I tend to not go on the 14th of July because everybody knows about the firework and it's very, very busy.
Yeah. And for our listeners that don't know what the 14th of July is, that's the Fête Nationale, like the national holiday in France. Yeah.
It's when we have fireworks in most places, and it's very nice. And then not very far from there, you have Las Tours, which are old chateaus that are they've obviously lost some battles because there's not much left of them. But you can hike up to the chateaus. People with kids love this. Kids love to climb up there. And it's not super challenging. Like some of these chateaus, old medieval chateaus that you can explore, you have to be a good hiker. Those, are pretty easy to do. So you could do that in the same day if you wanted to. Have a little bit of a, physical challenge if that's something you're into. Another place that is absolutely marvelous is Albi. So now we're going kind of north east of Toulouse a little bit. Albi has a beautiful medieval city center with a gorgeous basilica cathedral called Sainte-Cécile, which has so this whole area where the cathedral is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And what that means is that it's preserved really well. Also that it's accessible for people who have mobility issues. And that it's, they're ready for people to come visit by the busload, pretty much. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place. So I would say you can spend the morning and have your lunch in Albi. So you can do the morning visiting the cathedral, then have some lunch. Then in the afternoon, early afternoon, you could go see the Toulouse-Lautrec Museum, because Toulouse-Lautrec was not in Toulouse at all. He actually grew up in a town called Lautrec, and Albi was also where his family, he came from a very wealthy family, and they had places to live all through the southwest, but his museum is there. Toulouse-Lautrec did not live a very long life. He was a very famous painter, but his mother preserved his work by donating it to the city of Albi, saying, you have to display it. In exchange, it's free, but you have to display it. And so they put all of his work in this beautiful chateau, l'Episcopat. So this is where the bishops used to live. It's a palace, and it's now the museum, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So Albi, I mean, you could do it in a half day if you were in a big hurry. I would say spend the day, do morning the cathedral. It's well worth taking a tour of the cathedral because it is nothing like you've ever seen before. From the outside, it looks like a fortress, and inside, it looks like heaven. So it's really very striking, because something that happened around Toulouse in the 1200s and 1300s is that we had a lot of people who believed in this new religion that we now call the Cathars. But they were in opposition with the Catholic Church. The King of France was also very interested in expanding his reach into the southwest of what is now France, but was not France at the time. And so he allied with the Pope to send crusaders to cut down on this heresy. And the cathedral in Albi was built to kind of scare people because of its appearance. It looks very fortress-like. But as soon as they went inside, it looked like heaven. So it was like a way to say, come to the Catholic faith. We are better than your faith, which was not into the habit of building anything, let alone cathedrals. So that's and I should mention that for all of these towns and even about the Cathars, we've had episodes of my podcast about all of these things. So if you're really interested, you go to joinusinfrance.com and you do a search and you'll find all this stuff.
Yeah.
Another place that's very close to Albi and also very fun is Cordes-sur-Ciel. it's very hilly. So, you know, I wouldn't go with a stroller or a wheelchair, but it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. And from up there, you have a beautiful view. It's cobblestone streets, hilltop. There's art galleries. There's restaurants. I don't think they have any restaurant that I would write home about, but you can eat a good meal up there. There's a museum of chocolate and sugar.
Oh.
That people tend to enjoy. So that's a beautiful half a day as well. And then now in completely the opposite direction, and I think that's the last one I'm going to do because it's just too many things otherwise. Foix, the city of Foix is due south of Toulouse, and that is one you can go to on the train, but it's better if you have a car because not very far from Foix you have the Grotte de Nio, which is another painted cave. So you would reserve a spot to see the painted cave, and this is one where you go in with a little flashlight. It's not lit very well, and it's not improved. So like the path is all up and down, and you have to bend down and not hit your head and all of that. And you walk about a kilometer and a bit, almost a mile, almost a full mile before you get to the paintings. And then they turn on some lights for a few minutes, and you see the paintings on the walls, and it's just a beautiful experience.
So do you book, just a quick question with the caves, do you have to book those in advance, those reservations? Because I figured they probably put a cap on the number of visitors.
They do have a cap, and Nio also has English visits. I think it's 11 and 3 off the top of my head, but you have to book that in advance because they do sell out. They can't let any number of people in there, and especially if you want to visit in English, it's best to reserve that in advance. And Foix itself, the city it's fine, but it's not anything that you would visit because it's stunning or anything. But it has a beautiful chateau that's also hilltop, and it's not so hard to climb up there. I mean, it's a bit of a hike, but not too bad. And it's a beautiful chateau with a nice museum and a lot of a very good audio guide, and you can get up there. And they have during school vacations and the summer, they have exhibits where they have people showing. So they will show you medieval weapons, for example, but they are dressed up in medieval costume, and they show you the weapons. You have the potter showing you the pottery. You have the guy using the trebuchet, which is like a war machine to throw out massive rocks at the enemy. And this is true in a lot of places around the southwest of France and a lot of rural France outside of Paris. A lot of things close. We're recording this in February. This time of year, a lot of things are closed, and they will just open this weekend. The school holidays start for the Toulouse area and the Paris area. And so all of a sudden, the things are going to open just because it's school holiday and they know they're going to have more visitors. So just make sure that you go at a time when things are open. Then generally between early April and early November, things are mostly open. But it's something to look at. And I should have said that anytime you visit one of these caves, the painted caves, you need to bring a jacket because it's cold in the caves.
Yeah.
I've seen people in flip-flops and tank tops. That's not good. You don't do that.
It sounds like with some of the caves, you might want to bring like a hiking shoe or something with a bit more traction to it.
Yes, caves are always wet and slippery potentially, so yeah, you have to plan those things. But, most people can do that. And then you have, if you have more time, you can easily go to spend a few days in the Dordogne. I like to use Sarlat-la-Canéda as a central point, and then you can drive around from there. The Dordogne has several wonderful things you can do. They have painted caves. They have beautiful caves that are not painted, but still very nice. They have abris, which is a place where people have lived and sheltered for a very long time. And these places are usually high up on a cliff, and they have a natural kind of cavity, but a shallow cavity. And people they like to sleep up there because you could see what was coming. You had water. Usually they liked it when you had water just down below, so they could go get water, and they could cover the front to protect from the elements. Because despite the fact that we call our ancestors cavemen, they did not live in caves. They didn't like caves. Caves are too dark. You have bears and hyenas and lions in caves. So the ones who went in to paint were the brave ones. And they probably picked their time really carefully. To go
Yes.
But they like to have natural protected areas, and so these were used for a very long time. So you have the abris to visit. You have a lot of medieval villages that are absolutely beautiful, and you also have a lot of chateaus, a lot of castles that are on both sides of the river. And if you take a tour, they will explain that these chateaus sometimes were pledged their allegiance to the English, and sometimes was to the French, and they switched, and some switched, and some never did, and there's a whole history around that. But
I was going to say, oh, sorry, that seems quite common in a lot of French chateaus.
Yes. Whoever was the ruler at the time decided, the French king is nicer to me, I'll be French, and then 100 years later, no, I'm going to be English.
Yeah.
So those are the things you can do. And of course, the Dordogne has a lot of very nice gastronomy. Not a lot of wine growing in that area, but you will eat very well. So long as you like duck.
Nice.
Duck.
Yes. No. So that's great. That definitely answers my question of like, if you have a few extra days, what would you add to the Dordogne?
Yeah, I would add the Dordogne. You could also go, so for people who are more active and like hiking and biking and things like that, there's a website that works really, really well called Komoot, Komoot, and you can enter the name of any town in France or many places in the world, as a matter of fact, and it will show you either cycling, hiking, graveling for people who like this sort of thing. And you could go on beautiful hikes around old chateaus. They're often called Cathar castles, but that's a misnomer because Cathars never built anything. They were a very nihilist kind of religion. They believed that anything that stuff was all of the devil. Like anything material was of the devil. And so they were not materialistic at all. And so they didn't build anything. But sometimes they had to seek refuge in chateaus that were abandoned or that were left open that they could go. And sometimes they fought for their own survival in those chateaus. And so these are called the Cathar castles. And there's a lot of them around Carcassonne. So if you look at Carcassonne and you go east and to the Pyrenees and all the way to the Mediterranean, there's kind of like a big square there that has a lot of Cathar castles. I didn't talk about the Mediterranean coast, but that's also part of Occitanie. So if you wanted to go to places that are just beautiful, but not like the French Riviera, okay? But you could go to Sète, you could go to Agde, you could go to Collioure, another beautiful village in the southwest. There's a lot of places, I can't really name them all because we have so many.
Yeah.
But,
and you could never cover it all in one trip, really, unless,
right.
Even if you, again, like living there, you said that you still find new places and things to explore. Yeah.
The Lot-et-Garonne, I have not talked about those very much. I talked about Montauban and Moissac, but there's more, there are more beautiful villages. I was in a village, Puy-Celle-ci, just last Friday. It's gorgeous. It's renovated, and there are a lot of wealthy people who like to buy a place in especially in Puy-Celle-ci. A lot of the places you can tell that they've been bought by very wealthy people who can afford a really very nice proper renovation. And but the wealthier they are, the less time they spend there. So you have other villages not very far that are from the same period, but where it's locals living there, and obviously they don't have the sort of money to make it look as pretty, but it's the same sort of villages, So if you can stand a bit of unsightly facade here and there, then you'll like it just fine. It's endless around here. The Gers is another beautiful part of the country. For gastronomy, you can't beat it. We have a lot of Bastide in this part of the country as well. Bastide is a town that was declared. Okay, so imagine you're a knight and you have this land and you would like to develop it. You need people. To develop a land, you need people. And how do you attract people to your land rather than other land? Because you're not going to give up a lot of land. You're going to keep owning everything because that's how they did this. But you can give people preferential treatment. So you say, okay, if you come to my new established Bastide, then you can do business without paying taxes. You can have a house without paying taxes. You give people, but in exchange, you want to attract people who are skilled. Mm-hmm. So they would pass, the word would go out that the Lord of this town is looking for skilled people. And they would go and have some advantages because they could do business. And so we have a lot of these bastides that were established in the 1200s, 1300s. And they're very, you can tell because they always have a marketplace at the center of the town. The church is not at the center of the town. The church is off a little bit. There's always a Catholic church, obviously, but it's not right on the plaza. And it's usually a grid. They wanted to do it like easy, so they just set a grid and have houses along there. And that was the kind of fast construction of the 1200s and 1300s.
Yeah. Wow. This sounds like an epic itinerary. I wish we had more time to explore. Yeah. But you did mention about how having a car would be easier. Is that best way to get around would be having a car?
You don't need it every day. If you're going to be in Toulouse, you don't need a car in Toulouse. But you don't need a car to go to Albi, for example. There is a train. You can go to Foix in the car. Although if you do that, how do you get to Nyon? You can't. So really, these are places where you need a car. It doesn't have to be a fancy car, but you do need a vehicle, yeah.
Yes. And if you're like me, who's an American, that we haven't learned how to drive stick, make sure it's an automatic car before you book it.
You can rent an automatic. And more and more car rental companies will suggest that you get an automatic, an EV, an electric car. And we have very good infrastructure for charging, even in those villages. The problem is we still have a problem starting the charge, because as a local, I have RFID cards, which are like a special credit card that I can start the charge and be billed. And so I wouldn't recommend you take an EV to most of these places unless you understand how EVs work and things like that. But yeah, you need a car.
Okay. And then for people that choose not to, it did sound like you said that you do some day trips where you'll drive people around if they book that, or if there are other day trips that you know of that people can do.
Oh, all of these that I talked about, I can do with people. I can take people.
Okay.
Oh, I should mention that Carcassonne has a train as well. So you can go to Carcassonne. So you could do Carcassonne, but if you want to do it with Las Tours, you need a car.
Okay.
So, But yeah, if you go to joinusinfrance.com/boutique, you can see all of my things. Nice.
And then I know that, especially, traveling in a place outside of like some of the bigger cities and stuff, at least in my personal experience, knowing French certainly helps. But what about those who are English speakers, maybe have very limited French or don't speak French at all? Would they be able to get by fairly well in this area?
Yes. The magic word in France is bonjour.
Mm-hmm.
If you can manage bonjour, you're fine. So whenever you walk, it is... I think it must be coming from the Middle Ages, where like you had to declare yourself not a threat or something, because once you've said bonjour, which means hello, it's all it means, then this person is a civilized human being who greets me like a normal person, and they kind of relax. And if you say anything else, like if you say, excuse me, I'm looking for this. No. Bonjour. I'm looking for this.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. And then when do you switch from bonjour to bonsoir?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter? Okay.
Doesn't matter at all.
I've asked a lot of French people, and it feels like it's just kind of how it feels during that time.
Doesn't matter. Like I say bonjour all day, and sometimes it's 9 a.m. and I say bonsoir. I don't know why. It doesn't matter. It's really not...
Not
of no
deal.
Importance whatsoever. Nobody
just
will...
that you say it.
You have to say
important.
it.
Yeah.
You have to say it. But which one you say, whatever.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yes.
Okay. And then we have, I guess, if there's one must-see place during your itinerary that you'd like to really highlight, what would be that place that is like prioritize that the most?
Well, it depends on who you are, really. So... we always take, when we do a boot camp, we always take people to Carcassonne.
Okay.
We always take people to Albi. Because these are the ones that are really showy and very interesting. So I would say those two. Okay.
Is there any overrated spot in the South, like in this kind of area that you're talking about, that a lot of people tend to flock to that you're like, it's okay? You don't necessarily recommend people doing if they have a limited amount of time.
Well, you don't want to go back to Carcassonne. Like, you don't want to go to Carcassonne on a super busy day. It would have more to do with when you can do it. There are places where... you really shouldn't go on a busy... Like in May, we have all these long weekends, right, in France?
Mm-hmm.
And they get overrun with people. So there are places where you shouldn't go when it's like that. And there's also places where you shouldn't go when it's dead. Like if you go to some of these little... Saint-Cirque-la-Popie, which is gorgeous, but you go on a Monday in February... and it's dead. There's nobody there. All the stores are closed. There might be one restaurant open, but that's it. So it's more of a time and place rather than I don't recommend it.
Okay. So avoiding sort of peak school holidays, maybe like summertime peak when everybody's traveling.
Yes. So if you want to go to we have this thing called les plus beaux villages de France. So France's most beautiful villages. Well, those you should go on peak holiday. because on peak holiday you will have 100 people there. In the middle of winter, you will have 0 people there. You'll have the friendly cat who comes up to you and rubs against your legs,
Yeah.
which every town seems to have.
Yes.
But you won't have anything else. So there are places where you want to go when it's peak holiday, and others where you don't want to. Like places like Carcassonne, don't go when it's peak holiday or a holiday weekend or something.
Okay. It's good to know. And then, do you have any other tips for this area while people are there?
Don't plan too much. Walk as much as you can. Stop for a glass of wine once in a while. Try going into any pastry shop that you like. Don't sweat the small stuff. Don't look for the best croissant in Toulouse or whatever. They're all good. So long as they're in your hand, they're all good.
Yes. That's a fair point.
Just don't buy them at the grocery store is the thing. You know, go to a proper bakery, buy some pastry, buy some croissant. If you see a line outside, it's probably a good sign.
That's a good
I
tip.
have my favorites, obviously, but I can't list them all. Like, you know, there's too many that are good. And I think that's another thing is if you're just in France for a few days and you want to have an Airbnb, you want to cook for yourself, another good thing to know about is Picard, which is it's a frozen food company, but they make really good frozen foods. And so if you're staying at an apartment and you have a stove, you have a microwave, whatever, on your way home, stop at Picard, look at what they have, get something that you think you would like, and warm it up. And you have a nice meal. You didn't have to cook anything.
Oh, that's a really good tip. It's good to know.
Yeah.
And then, well, thank you for that. And then, where can we find more information about visiting the southwest of France? I mean, I know you mentioned your podcast. You probably have some specific episodes or
Oh,
your
we have a
blog.
bunch of. Use the search bar. We have a bunch of them. Like
There's so many.
There's so many, and we've been doing this 11 years, like I mentioned. So we, like in Toulouse, we have one about the parks and like the whole idea of bringing parks and nature into the city, which was not that long ago. And I mean, we have lots of episodes about lots of different bits, and people seem to enjoy just hearing about France in general, even if it's places they're not going to go. And we don't just talk about the Southwest, obviously. We mostly talk about Paris.
Yeah.
I mean, the top destinations in France are Paris, Provence, Normandy, Strasbourg,
Yeah.
and Occitanie is, way down the list. Like, people will go to all these other places first because those are the ones they've heard of. But, Lonely Planet rates these places and says the Southwest is great. And I think they're right. It's great.
Well, I'm excited to go and to learn more this year. And it definitely feels like it's probably a place where maybe a first timer wouldn't go there. But if you want to go and you have a specific interest, and yeah, I mean, it does seem like it has it all. You have some Mediterranean. I mean, you have the coast. You've got, it seems very hilly. I don't know if it's mountainous and maybe closer to you get to the Pyrenees.
Yeah,
but
when you get to the Pyrenees, it's mountain, but
yeah.
and you can ski there too.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
I do sometimes. Did when I was a kid. There's a bit of everything. From Toulouse, you can drive 2 hours and be at a ski resort or at the beach.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty unique place to be then, for sure.
Yeah.
And then if people wanted to follow along and learn more about France, because you certainly have a wealth of information, not just about the southwest of France, but also France travel in general, where would they check you out at?
Well, if you're a podcast, if you like to listen to podcasts, then search for Join Us in France wherever you get your podcasts. It's everywhere. The website also has a lot of information. All the episodes are transcribed, so that if you want to search for a specific place that you've heard of, you're not sure, you can search and see if we mentioned it on the podcast, if we've talked about it. That's how you would find me.
Nice. Well, thank you.
I mean, I have a Facebook group. I'm
Yeah.
useless at Instagram.
Yeah.
Just bad at it.
It's a lot to do podcasting, and you have like a blog
Yeah.
where you at least have the podcast or transcribed, and social
lot of
media is like a
work.
whole other animal on top of that.
And I'm just not, it's my generation, I guess. I wasn't raised with it. And I mean, I understand Facebook because that's where I keep up with my friends and family. So I get that. But a lot of the other stuff, I'm like, "Ugh, do I really have to do all this?"
No, I get it.
Yes.
There's a lot of social media, but thank you so much for
Thank you.
all of this detailed information you just gave us about spending some time in the Occitanie. Sorry, I'm
No, you
sorry
said
about
it just
my
right.
French
Occitanie is what it is. Yes.
Occitanie
Yeah.
part of France and how to spend a week there, and just all of these great tips. That was so much great information. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You are very welcome, and enjoy your travels wherever they might take you.
Thanks. Bye.